Hey, folks, welcome to a new episode of the Whiskey Ring podcast series, talking to some of the really stars of the show at Bhakta Spirits to talk to them about different aspects of the industry, of the business, and just to hear about what they're doing. So, in this episode, I'm thrilled to welcome on Pete Lynch. He is the master blender for Bhakta Spirits. You may also have known him from his time at Whistlepig. And with that, Pete, welcome on.
David, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be the third person of the day speaking with you. I can tell I've got you on the ropes already, just looking into your eyes.
I
I'm,
will.
I'm thrilled to be here, though. Thanks for having
No,
me.
no, I will admit, three in a day was probably my limit, but
And speaking with
um,
Johnny, too, he's got a bit of energy, that one, huh?
but that's fine because I just let you
Well,
guys talk, and that's the best
perfect.
thing I can do. Uh,
Beautiful.
so yeah, Pete and I got to meet Pete when I was up there at the Winter Carnival, as we called it, in February. Again, I keep saying on each episode, a really fantastic experience all the way around, and each of the parts of the experience were led by someone different. So the blending experiment that I've talked on about a little bit was led by you in the blending lab. So we'll hit on that. But first off, since you're the first guest of the day with a pour in hand, I'm going to
Ah,
ask, what are you drinking?
well, it might be a little bit early, but it's 5 o'clock somewhere. And more importantly, I just don't feel right speaking with fellow enthusiasts, professionals, etc., without something in my hand. What I'm drinking today is something a bit unique, a bit more interesting. It is a 2012 vintage Armagnac that has a several month finish in a 400-liter new French oak Armagnac cask with with a medium long toast profile. What this does, among various other things, is it actually gives it a very whiskey-like aroma in a lot of ways. I particularly think on my experience using toasted barrels and tasting a lot of products within the past 5 to 10 years that have employed that in the whiskey space. And this whiskey, without saying, or sorry, this Armagnac, without saying too much, you might be seeing more of him, perhaps hanging out with a couple different spirits in a bottle. That's all I'm going to say for now, though. So marketing doesn't get mad at me.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So I wanted to start the interview. Of course, we are going to talk about Bhakta Spirits and what you're doing there. But because of your experience and your journey, I wanted to jump back to your time at Whistlepig just for a little bit to talk with that. And the first thing I wanted to ask was, you've been described in various interviews and profiles as Dave Pickerel's protege. Um, Certainly one of them, if not, the protege. And you got to work with him for several years at Whistlepig. And the first question I had about that was, I believe you said in one interview that he got you started with this on rye. This, obviously, that was what Whistlepig was doing, was rye, and that was one of Dave's big passions. And so your palate grew up around rye. And I'd love to hear first, what was that experience like of having your palate trained like that?
That's a great, interesting, and very different question. Thank you. And it is true. I mean, I would very specifically kind of focus myself in American whiskey. If I had the choice of any whiskey in the world at a bar, I would almost always go for an American whiskey and a rye at that if I could, for that exact reason, to train one's palate. But what does it mean to even train one's palate? I mean, everyone's going to do it differently. Really, it's a exercise in repetition in thought. You taste, you think, you store sensory memories, you repeat. You're constantly building upon those experiences. Sensory memory cannot be overstated, too, in its importance. It's this weird sort of thing we all have, we all employ in different ways. It's the exact reason why you can smell a glass of whiskey and say, "Oh, this reminds me of when I used to go to that meadow with my parents and have a picnic." That smell on the breeze, that's a sensory core memory right there. For me, I'm building these core memories with hopefully every glass of spirit I'm tasting. And with rye as the linchpin for all that, rye being both a very flavorful spirit, a very differentiated spirit, and a spirit that was not readily available when I began at Whistlepig, mind you, in 2015, really helped me, I think, explore a different side of spirits and whiskey in particular that the general populace doesn't get to see. Because when we think about barrels, we understand there's variability between them. Barrels right next to each other might taste wildly different, but we don't realize how extreme that can be. And as the guy who gets to taste and approve and purchase and et cetera, not just barrels from Canada of the best rye in the world, but from America as well, and later on other types of spirits as well, I could not have been more fortunate to be able to say, this is the pure unadulterated flavor. This is what happens when you follow these steps. You put this type of whiskey into this type of wood and follow it for this long. Additionally, I was able to have conversations that were quite intimate with other producers, which I'm guessing most other people aren't as fortunate to have. But for me, it was probably the most unique experience I'll have in my life. Granted, I'm now here tasting 100-plus-year-old Armagnac, so I'm not quite sure if I can say that for that long. But being able to taste whiskey from 2 months old all the way up to 20 years old from somewhere like Alberta Distillers Limited up in Alberta, Beam Suntory subsidiary, amazing company putting out some fantastic juice, tasting other Canadian distillates, even branching into some producers that were putting out single malt, like Glen Scotia up in, or sorry, not Glen Scotia, Glen Ora up in Nova Scotia, and everything in between, obviously quite a bit of MGPI tossed in there. I come to find that we don't really understand rye at all, do we? We think of rye, especially back in ancient history, 10 years ago at this point. We think of rye still, though, as the spicy, vibrant, punchy, in-your-face spirit. And it's not a wrong take, but that's like saying every bourbon is sweet and corn forward. It's just not the case. It really depends upon every step within that production process. Unless you're the guy who was intimately involved from the mashing process all the way to dumping it, filtering it, bottling it, it's very difficult to say where flavor comes from. It's very hard to say, oh, this caramel note is indeed coming from the barrel, even though that's something we naturally assume and take for granted. And I came to learn that in rye, that couldn't have been more true. You take your MGPI classic flavor profiles, it's a bit more herbaceous, it's a bit fruitier. It's spicy still, but it's not quite as in-your-face pepper spice as maybe the base for Old Overhold is, or perhaps the Rittenhouse base actually might be a better example. On the flip side of that, you can take Whistlepig 10-year being initially ADL stocks exclusively. That is very much the punchier, spicier side of rye, but it doesn't mean it's not without nuance, not without complexity. So to wrap this all up with a nice little bow, I think that my experience at Whistlepig, focusing on rye in particular, and really trying to explore this category, which we had sort of turned to the wayside since Prohibition, realistically, helped me to challenge and open myself up and say, and also say, it doesn't matter what I like. It matters what people like. And it matters for me to be able to identify flavors in an objective way rather than subjective. If I only made whiskey I liked, we'd be all drinking just sweet bombs all the time. I might even put some sugar in there because I have quite a sweet tooth, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. It made me, I think, slightly unique in this industry, but it also just gave me this experience that I can consistently draw on going forward.
I do remember you saying when we were in the blending lab that you had a sweet tooth when it came to that. So, and that you had to, obviously you've done such a great job of putting out these products. You've had to hold yourself back and be like, no, what is everyone else?
Exactly. Yeah. David, when I come to your house, hide the chocolate.
Oh,
hide
fair
it
enough.
all. And yes, to the crowdsourcing side, I mean, that was part of the inspiration for some products we did at Whistlepig, like Farm Stock, where we would quite literally I'd travel around the country. I'd run blending sessions. I'd take your data. I'd put it on a graph, very sexy stuff. But then I could see, where do the flavor profiles lie that people enjoy the most? What blends are hitting the hardest? What do the people want? And I can't help but think that's the best way to make the product. And if I happen to like it too, that's a nice bonus.
I was a member of Flaviar at the time when you guys did that farm stock experiment. So I was part of that.
Oh my God. You saw that live broadcast and everything.
Yep.
I've got an anecdote to share with you, my friend.
Yeah. Go for it if you like.
So the very beginning of that session was interesting. So I was in my Vermont apartment, had a new puppy, a couple months old, and a cat who thought it was its mother. And as I am clicking join, as we're finishing up our initial kind of, going through it with everybody, my dog gets stuck in this step stool, like in a very strange way, starts screaming his head off, all sorts of nonsense. I very quickly and seemingly discreetly go and save him. The cat does not think I am saving it. The cat thinks I am the cause of it. So the
Mm.
cat shreds me, absolutely shreds my
Ooh.
arm. I would say, yeah, like, oh my goodness, it was not the right way to start that off. But yeah, I was a bleeding guy during that entire sort of thing. It was a great way to start it off, but we had a blast. I mean, it was a fun experience to say the least, and I think highly indicative of the time with COVID and whatnot.
Yes, it definitely it took advantage in a good way. It took advantage is the wrong word. Capitalized on, better way to put it.
Absolutely.
That feeling that everyone was home alone, wanted something new to drink, and it was one of the earlier opportunities for everybody to get on a video call together and taste things and say, yeah, this is what we like.
Right.
And I just remember it being a lot of fun because of that. It was one of my first experiences
Oh, well.
blending on my
I'm
own.
glad to hear that because I basically cringe when I think back to that, particularly because the whole time I'm just holding my arm, trying to stem
Well,
the
I
tide
mean,
of blood.
that's a fair reason. Like
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be like you should have been stone faced or whatever. Uh, so you just mentioned something that I'm going to come back to, which is the spreadsheets. But I I did want to just ask one more question about your time at Whistlepig that transfers over, which is you mentioned you used some new oak, you used some intriguing oak. For the Magellan's Atlantic, I believe it was I
Oh,
think release
sure.
7. You
Yep.
used Spanish oak and Brazilian teak, excuse
Yeah.
me, teak. And thank you, autocorrect, for that in my notes. Um, so Brazilian teak. So these are Spanish oak. I guess maybe a few whiskey nerds might know a little bit, but Brazilian teak, not so much. So I'm curious just to know how you found that wood and then
Right.
decided what this was the right thing for the expression you wanted to create.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The simplest answer is I am a complete wood nerd and have been from the start of my career in on the supplier side. Wood is not there's no most important part of whiskey production, aged spirits production, but wood is just as important as every other step, if not, up there with the most important parts. And just as a quick aside, it breaks my heart when I taste a whiskey that is amazing, except for, this little thing called the wood influence, which is pretty important because the distiller, who's maybe a brewer beforehand, he's been home distilling for a while, he's honed his technique, he's got a beautiful spirit, but then he puts it in a 15-gallon, kiln dried barrel with a subpar toast or a char level and just kind of ruins it all. I was lucky enough to get to know some of the guys at ISC, Independent Stave Company, uh, and really start to furnish myself with books and online articles. I joined the Institute of Brewing and Distilling, which opened up a whole world of online journals to me, and just started to read and learn about wood and how not just the type of wood itself, but even within American white oak, standard from your sort of central, south, mid region of the US, can vary wildly just based off specifics when it comes to the botanical structure, the even something as simple as the growing years. The tightness of the rings have a direct impact on various aspects of the flavor extraction. Never mind branching into other wood types. There were a lot of experiments I did at Whistlepig that maybe never saw the light of day, but playing around with things like chestnut oak, like acacia oak, various types of wood with various toast profiles, even playing with American oak or Vermont oak, which was a fun one. Vermont oak is almost like as close as you can get to French oak while still being American oak in terms of its chemical structure, in terms of its flavor impact as well. But for me, this really opened up the floodwaters, really, to say, why not just start to experiment? And I was lucky enough that I helped to create a program at Whistlepig where I could sort of have these experimental type barrels going on. And it might be something as simple as a Pinot Noir finish from a buddy out in California, but it could be something as complex as this Brazilian teak you mentioned. It is actually teak adjacent. I tried to put that in marketing's brain. It is not teak. They didn't seem to mind putting it on there. That's fine. Regardless of that, this Amburana, Amburana wood was one that I was, buddies with some barrel brokers, was chatting away. He was like, hey, I got these barrels, seemed to me like he was having a hard time selling them. But I did some research. I said, hell yeah, send it my way. It was a little bit pricey, so I might have hit it from the CFO at the time. When the barrels came in, I was like, oh, hell yeah. They had these really funny bungs on them that were made of wood. about 7 inches tall. So we called them Pinocchios, just looked like a long wood nose. And this barrel, I've never experienced anything like it. And if you've tasted Boss Hog 7, you know what I'm talking about. Amburana is this amazingly aromatic, intensive wood type, where even just with a light to light medium toast profile, the level of extraction and the intensity thereof, I've never seen anything like it. To give you an example, Boss Hog 7 was, as you mentioned, finished in Spanish oak and these Amburana casks. The Spanish oak influence, realistically, at the end of the day, is negligible compared to this Amburana influence. The time spent in wood is very much the flip of that. We had a relatively quite quick turnaround in the Spanish oak. These were new charred Spanish oak barrels. Spanish oak being a white oak, but slightly on the drier side, we'll say. I was looking to clean it up a bit and perhaps add a bit of body. We finished that for about 3.5 weeks. The Amburana, thank God I decided to say, all right, day 3 is indeed when I think the finish will be done, because day 3, if I had come 2 hours later, it would have been way over finished. The Amburana is such an intensive flavor profile that I reuse sample bottles all the time. Vermont, be green, reduce, reuse, recycle. If I put even a drop of Amburana in there, done. That bottle is done forever. Mm-hmm. And this sort of speaks to my operations on the whole at Whistlepig, where I'm constantly trialing, maybe on the smaller side, and then these things eventually trickle into something like a Boss Hog. I was lucky enough to probably play around with 125 to 150 different types of barrels, whether that's different spirit types, different wood types, different formats in terms of size, different heat treatments, so toast, chars, etc., and really sort of build up my own knowledge base and say, all right, you take this rye, finish it in this barrel, or this bourbon even, finish it in this barrel, or place it from the get-go as new make into this barrel. These are the yields. This is what happens. I can then extrapolate that. I think that I'm lucky to be somewhat good at sort of mentally extrapolating flavor profiles, if that makes sense, doing mental blends, saying, all right, I think these flavors would come together in these ways and exhibit these profiles. But, I can't think of anybody else who gets to taste whiskey and then say, yeah, I think this would taste good in this barrel, and then go for it. And I consider myself incredibly privileged to do that. Check my privilege at the door, they say, but here I am just bragging left and right. But that really helped set the stage for me to understand exactly how spirit and wood interact. And when I say exactly, I mean barely, because the truth of the matter is we are just at the tip of the iceberg with our understanding of maturation, of the forces at play. Okay, we might understand, doing a GCMS, which is just scientific examination using certain machines. We may understand that there are these levels of these compounds in this type of whiskey. But then when in a lab, we simulate these, and we've seen this in various rapid age companies, which have used different levels of scientific advancement, but admirably so in a lot of cases, we see it just does not translate for various reasons. The oxidation effect is missing. The level of extraction is too rapid, and there's certain chemical interactions that do not occur along the way, given the length of time, whatever it might be. Now translating that to where I am now, I think that there's 2 interesting factors. One is I'm so ready to play with all types of wood. We already are. As I mentioned, what I'm drinking right now, it's a bit different in terms of, just the fact that it's relatively, for us, younger Armagnac, but with a very unique finish at cast strength and whatnot. I'm not just drinking this for fun. It's always you might say chore, but homework is a better way to put it. Drinking is an academic pursuit for me, realistically. And I'm thinking right now, I'm sorry, David, I'm cheating on you. I'm thinking, maybe we should tweak this a little bit. Maybe this could take a little bit less time because I'm picking up a bit of acrid on the back end. I don't know. It helps me. I've got a long way to go. Don't get me wrong, but I think that my experience at Whistlepig with barrels in particular, with employing wood in so many different ways, with trying the same type of barrel with different base distillates and flipping that as well, has equipped me in a way that maybe doesn't make me unique, but at least gives me a solid base bone to say, all right, let's take this 150-year-old Armagnac and mix it with these sorts of things. And then let's put it in a barrel. And, maybe every time I do that successfully, time and time again, the guys in France might have a bit less of a heart attack, but this is an ancient spirit we're dealing with, right? This is a protected category. And we're the crazy guys saying, why not? Why not just make an entirely new category with something like 1928 or some of these other products where perhaps tasting on the campus up here, but not quite talking about yet. Why not? Especially if it tastes damn good, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's funny. I never, I knew that uh, that Boss Hog had been an early user of Amberana, and I didn't make the connection that it was the teak adjacent.
Yeah, right. Well, because the name isn't on the right.
Exactly. So I should have made the connection, but it's funny. I remember tasting that product and when it came out. So this was before everybody went through an Amberana craze the last year and a half.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest. I think you and Doc Swenson's did the best job using that wood.
Thanks.
Because as you said, it is so freaking strong.
Yeah, it really.
Like you said, what other thing did you need 3
nothing.
days?
There's nothing. I mean, you might get the influence of the spirit quickly, but 3 days is wild, unheard of.
The only thing faster than that would just be putting pure cinnamon extract in there.
Exactly.
And I'll be honest, most of the ones, even ones who I thought did a good job trying, it just wasn't successful. Then there were some who just went nuts. And they finished it for 6 months with Amberana chips, and I'm like, come on, people. Like, you knew this wasn't good. Come on. But anyway, the funny thing was, I was thinking it does take a someone who's very honest with themselves and someone who's also confident and has support from their company to be like, no, 3 days, that's it. I don't care that I do care, but I don't care that this barrel cost X amount of dollars. It's about the flavor, and you don't want to just use it for the sake of using it. Having said all of that, unless you absolutely have to, I pray you don't put just the pure 1868 into an Amburana.
I promise you, David, I am not touching. I'm not even looking at the 1868. I don't even want to know where it is, to be honest.
I think that would break my heart, let alone others. But no. So I'm also quite interested in the wood structure. I know we talked a bit when I was on campus about the chemical nature of these things, and I do also find, I think I told you that my number one negative note or indicator that I'm not going to like a whiskey or a spirit is if it's too woody.
Yes, yeah, and that means so many things, though, doesn't it? Right.
Right. So for me, I can deal with astringency.
Yeah,
that's fine. Tannic notes within reason, fine. If it's too tannic, then that's different. But when it tastes like I'm chewing on a wood stave,
right, that's not quite okay with us, is it?
Right.
And we spoke too, I remember, about kiln dried wood versus air dried wood and the other aspects of bitter making that go into providing these flavors, right? And I agree with you very much so. I love wood, but there is very much a thing as too much wood. And absolutely. And it happens quickly.
And particularly in American whiskeys, it happens very quickly.
So, well, actually, I'm going to take this topic a bit further by extrapolating, if you will. One of the interesting things I found in my career, we'll say, is that a lot of these over-extracted flavors actually come from things like finishing casks. And more importantly, come from finishing casks from, say, the wine world, where the barrels we're dealing with couldn't be more different than, I mean, realistically, you look at them, they're not much different. But in a chemical sense, they are wildly different from any other spirit type barrel we've used. And I say wine and spirit very purposely. Wine being a much lower ABV product at, we'll call it max 15% standard, is going to interact and extract wood components from a barrel in a very different way than spirits will. And then additionally, and almost more importantly, or just as important, wine barrels are not charred, they are toasted. And not to knock on a toast product off for any means, it's more just pointing out the difference between a toast and a char, is that we will, through the charring process, destroy or denature a lot of compounds, for instance, like tannin, that can easily over-extract quite quickly. So we take this combination of lower strength ABV into the barrel, therefore having a very different impact on the wood. And just a toasted barrel, one of the biggest indicators for me of when a barrel finish was done was when it began to pull these sort of deeper unconverted tannic notes, these deeper unconverted structural notes and whatnot, these green wood notes, these sort of pencil shaving type notes, these over woody notes that are not over woody in a, oh, this has sat for too long in the barrel. It's that it is pulling deeply in here, after a span of perhaps even just 3 months or so. And, if you look at a lot of if you look at some newer brands that might have a 6-month finish or a 12-month finish in red Burgundy barrels, or, Pinot or Cab barrels or something like that, it's really easy to pull that sort of, it's a back mid palate note. It's that sort of wood in your face, but again, exhibits itself in various ways. I was always terrified though of, I never finished anything, I think, at Whistlepig for more than about 4 months or so, particularly if it was in a wine type barrel or a new toasted barrel. And I think that's something that most people don't really think about. And it doesn't mean that a 12-month finish with a wine cask is going to be bad. But if I'm putting 15-year-old whiskey or 12-year-old or higher into something like this, you better believe I'm going to be watching it like a hawk for those exact reasons.
Oh, absolutely. I guess so. This goes to a great question Sorry, I just called my own question a great question. That's weird.
Well, we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah,
we'll see.
We'll see. So, we've seen in some of the products that Bhakta Spirits has put out that, for example, the 2013 and 2014 bourbon, as well as the 2014 rye,
2013 rye, yeah,
2013 rye. Okay, that's what I thought. So the bourbon's being finished in Armagnac and the rye being finished in Calvados. I was curious for you. I mean, these are casks that we're talking about the finishing casks in this case. These are casks that are some age between 50 to 100. I mean, they're old casks. Oh, yeah. And as far as I know, for their entire lifespan thus far, they had held that one spirit, that Armagnac of whatever vintage, or several vintages. But the point more being that they were very old and they had held one spirit. And I'm curious, particularly coming from a more rye-based and American whiskey-based background, how you adapted to using casks in a different way because they're such a different animal than, let's say, a new oak cask or even a recharred one.
Or even a wine barrel that's been used for 25 years, or I mean, that's exactly. You're right. That was a great question. So give yourself that pat on the back.
All right, I'll take it.
Yeah, because it's multifold too. It's a lot of these barrels are minimum 50 years old. Some of the younger, if we don't count the new barrels we get in, which is not many, but we're dealing with barrels that have been in use for decades upon decades, that have held various types of spirit, that honestly don't have a huge amount of wood impact to give. Because when we buy a finishing barrel or source a finishing barrel, or use, in our case, our own barrels for finishing, which I would like to talk about in a second here, because that's something huge for us.
Sure.
We are pulling out, obviously, the flavor of the spirit that was in it before. If we think about Armagnac, which is actually a spirit that will have a lot of transference from barrel to barrel, and it might not happen quite as frequently when we start to get past the 10-year age point, but in the early years, Armagnac will sit in, I mean, depending on the chateau, it may be a new toasted oak barrel for a year and a half, transferred to perhaps that type of barrel's second use once it's done, or third use, or something like that. It's very much a flavor-driven experience with tradition involved as well, where they're trying to mitigate wood extraction and create a certain profile. I think they've hit the nail on the head, and there's a good reason they haven't changed it, because what they're doing too, as a side effect, is they're introducing more and more spirit in that will stay behind in the walls of the barrel itself. So by the time we get to a 1975 cask, which close on 50 years or so, has had Armagnac in it for Lord knows how long, we start to develop too this somewhat unique note to Armagnac, Cognac, Calvados as well, known as Rancio, which you may be familiar with. I'll give a brief and terrible explanation of it right now. Rancio is simply put a character of age. It is a flavor profile which hits us on the back palate, the finish, the mid palate a bit. It's very deep, it's very rich, it's very earthy. It's not necessarily hitting one flavor per se. And what's funny about Rancio is every time Rancio is a better way to say it, I think. Because Rancio doesn't sound great in English, does it? But yeah. I find that the flavor descriptors I use are oftentimes seemingly negative, but as we know, old leather boot can be a great flavor, can't it? So things like mushroom, this earthiness, almost a delicate and delicious mustiness, this this flavor you can't quite get anywhere else begins to sort of bake itself into this cask and really build itself up, in the sense that when we are finishing in these casks, I'm not really even expecting to pull any wood, really. I mean, we'll pull some nominal extraction from the oak itself, but Armagnac is a higher proof spirit. Armagnac's going to the barrel between 50 and 60+%, sometimes lower if it's later on in its life. But Armagnac is extracting in a similar way to whiskey, in the sense that I know when we put whiskey into these barrels, in the case of our 2 bourbon releases we spoke about, and our rye as well for the Calvados, which undergoes a similar process, I know we're going to pull not just the Armagnac flavor, if you will, but that deeper sort of ingrained rancio character. And I feel a lot more comfortable finishing for a much longer time. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention too the larger format of these casks, being 400 liter versus your standard 200 liter American standard bourbon barrel, gives us a gentler extraction as well. So we can spend a lot more time without worrying about pulling too much flavor. And it's almost a change in the sense that I am finishing for specifically the flavor of the spirit ingrained within. And that's a simple way to put it, because, you know, there's such a range of these flavors, rather than finishing for the overall impact, because I know that I'm not going to be pulling much of this wood character. I know it'll be a softer, longer term extraction that might start with these lighter, fruitier, more vibrant notes, depending on the vintage year, that will gradually, as we sit, pull more and more of these deeper, darker, almost, I mean, phenolic, realistically, if we were to GCMS them, they'd probably come up, you know, as varying phenols. But regardless, phenolic does not mean smoky. These phenolics are non-volatile. They're less apt to evaporate because they have high boiling points. They'll stick around for quite a while, and they'll tend to compound over time. That, and I can't actually, but there are some projects that I won't name where we will pick. I'll speak with Giles, my ops man. Say, I was thinking about 76 for this. I'm thinking that the front end of this whiskey is all where it needs to be. We might pull some more aromatic vanilla notes, but really what we need is to tamp up that spice character. We need to get some stewed fruit on the back end. And he might say, no, I think 85 is the better choice because it is hitting better on those, you know, exactly what I'm saying. Or he might flip it around and say, I really think a Calvados cask, you know, from a 35 to 40-year-old vintage is the right move here for X, Y, and Z reason. It's an interesting and different conversation. And I think I'm going to segue into an interesting fact about Bhakta, which I took for granted when I joined, which is that, as of now at least, we exclusively use our own barrels to finish. And what that means is we will dump barrels of Armagnac one day, and then 1 hour later after lunch, we will fill those barrels with something like whiskey. And nobody else has that opportunity. Only a very small percentage of producers have that opportunity. You know, people, when I consider myself lucky if I got a cask that only sat empty for 2 months, you know, and Lord knows what condition it sat in. Was it sitting outside, getting baked in the sun? Was it getting rained on? You know, who knows what happened? Did a bung stay out of it for a while? Did I have to reswell it? No, my guys dumped it an hour ago. I watched them do it. And then my guys filled it just now. And the I don't know if intensity is the right word, but the quality of flavor perhaps is very interesting. It's in ways you might not expect, and it's ways that are purely anecdotal in a lot of ways at this point because I've yet to do any research or whatnot. But usually, if you receive the barrel after a couple months, most of the liquid that's sitting in the walls of the wood, if it's been stored upright, or even if not, it will return back into the main. We'll call it a puddle at the bottom, if you will. Will begin to evaporate out. That liquid will change slightly. When you put the whiskey in, it will instantly blend with that juice that still sits there, but it will have more porosity to enter into the wood. Our barrels are soaking wet when we fill them up again. There's a very different interplay going on that I think lends to that reduction in wood extraction I mentioned just a bit ago, and that sort of increase in specifically spirit extraction. But it also gives us a leg up because we don't have that unknown, you know. I've worked with a ton of barrel brokers. I've never had a bad situation, but I also know how much is out of their hands. You know, they have to take these producers at their word for what they're getting. They have to turn those around as quickly as they can. It's a tough world, to be honest. And it's not knocking against them in any means. It's more just saying that there's a strange level of power and freedom that comes from using your own barrels, and not just any old barrel, but these incredibly high pedigree barrels that, you know, we will never get rid of unless they're culls unable to be used. And then we'll probably make them into some fancy, you know, furniture or something like that. You never know. I could always use a new chair. But yeah, it's something that I look to mimic going forward, but know that I will have a very hard time doing with other spirit types. I want to eventually start to work in a larger range of finishing barrels, different types of wood and whatnot. But it's hard to justify, first of all, when we have all these beautiful casks of amazing pedigree that we couldn't even find. And additionally, we still have a lot of room to play within the Armagnac space, within the Calvados space, with what we already have. And, we just put out 2014 bourbon, won best bourbon at ADI, which I was surprised, but very proud for, because for me, it's a quintessential bourbon. Flavor profile is exactly where I wanted to hit. As I mentioned, I have a sweet tooth. It's not overwhelmingly sweet. It's got some really nice aromatics on the vanilla and on the caramel side, on that nice sort of bourbon inviting nose where you just know it's going to be a pleasant sip. It is slightly dry on the palate. The Armagnac comes through, I think, with a bit of that stewed fruit hit on the back end to differentiate it overall from most bourbons. But I mean, it's not an everyday sipper because it's a small run. It's 150s on the shelf, well worth the price, I would say, but not exactly unless you got a pretty thick wallet, not exactly your everyday sipper for most people. But for me, that's the quintessential bourbon profile right there in a lot of ways. Is that exactly what we're going for with 2014 bourbon right there? What do you mind me asking? What do you think of 2014 versus 2013 bourbon? If you were able to try that,
I was the 2013 I had gotten to try, I think, just before going to campus. I tried it on campus, and I tried it again off campus because everything tastes better at the distillery, on campus, etc. Yeah. I've had some stuff I've tried at a distillery, and I tried at home, like, God, what was I thinking? But anyway, no, there was a difference. So the 2013, I think, was, to me, was slightly richer. Like I would call the mouthfeel more creamy,
right?
Whereas the 14, I would consider it a little more oily.
Okay, nice. Still with a nice palate presence, but very
exactly,
very
still
different.
A good palate presence. But the 14 was a little, it was more like silk in the mouth as opposed to a custard. Okay. Which, I mean, look, it was still plenty enough mouthfeel. I'd have to look back at my notes to exactly remember my exact notes, but I just remember that the mouthfeel in particular.
Note that you've ever written?
I tried, man. I tried for a while. 3,000 in, it's a little hard.
Heresy.
Yeah, that's fine. What I remember, and my initial concern, I think, going in before I tasted it, was that I thought that it was going to be too sweet. The 2013 in this case, because I figured, it's Armagnac, it's 125-day finish. I think I didn't know it was that fresh of a entry, but knew it was pretty close. Plus, you have a 99% corn mash bill,
right?
That in itself tends to be pretty sweet.
Oh yeah, a picture is being painted. Yeah,
right. So and I do take this into account in reviews and tasting notes of intentionality. Like if you tell me on the label it's a 99-1 corn recipe, it's 125 days in Armagnac, you tell me these exact details, as you said, it paints a picture,
right? And
it creates an expectation. So I guess my concern was not that the two would mix well. I think it made sense. I think Armagnac to bourbon is not too far of a jump in the spirit category. But yeah, I was just concerned that it was going to be too sweet.
Sure, right.
And ultimately I found, yes, it was on the sweeter side, but there was enough oak astringency, so the good kind of oak for me. I agree with you. The stewed fruits, I got more, like when you stew fruits, I think I wrote something like if you took a mulling wine and you stewed that down to a reduction, so you got these really rich fruit flavors, but not sickly sweet. Plus, you've got all those spices studded in there to give a nice eugenol from the clove and
absolutely. Yeah.
The black pepper guaiacol.
Nice call out of eugenol, by the way. This man knows his chemicals.
Oh, believe me. Here, I'll throw one for you, and this is purely just to feed my own ego. I used to say the only note that I really couldn't stand is too much wood in a whiskey. I found a second one, and this is thanks to a friend of mine who identified it for me, and now I can't get it out of my head, which is butyric acid.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And I know if I taste that, the whiskey's not done yet.
When you go, oh, it's a bit pukey, love.
Yeah, it's a bit pukey.
Yeah.
So, so butyric acid, if you don't know, I probably mentioned on the podcast before because I tend to repeat myself, but Usually baby vomit. That's the
Yeah.
that's the note.
It's a
But
very, yeah, it's a very present aromatic note, and then strangely present on the palate as well, in a way you wouldn't expect.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's present everywhere you don't want it to be. I don't know where you do want it to be present, but
Maybe if you're
it's
making
present everywhere.
Belgian beer, but we're not.
Maybe, exactly. So, and it usually comes, I haven't really found it in cognacs or armagnacs. I find it more in grain based spirits. Uh, but I mean, this is a chemical that it's going to, once it esterifies in the cask or via oxidation, it's going to become ethyl butyrate. And
Right.
that's more of a pineapple flavor.
Right. Nice
And
fruity flavors.
exactly, fruity flavor. It's still a little tart, but rich, nice, bright. And so that's usually when I look at something and I say, okay, maybe this could be good, but this needs more time because the whiskey or the spirit has not enough time in the wood to properly convert the
Right.
chemicals that it needs to do so. And maybe it can be saved. Maybe it'll be great in 3 to 4 years, or even in one more year. Maybe it's in Texas and it's got a huge heat on it. But either way, that's something that I pick up on. I'm just like, okay, it's not ready. Anyway, back to the 2013. So yeah, when I tried it, I was amazed at how balanced it was. And I tried it next to the 2013 rye.
Okay.
So
Sorry,
two
the
different
2013 bourbon next to the 2013 or the 2014?
the both 2013s next to each other.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. Um, and so I tried them next to each other, and I remember because I put the notes next to these notes. I do remember it was that the rye was delicious, and I love rye and Calvados. To me, it's apple pie in a glass if
Okay.
the rye has enough spice to it. And I said, if I hadn't had the bourbon beforehand, I blind would have rated the rye slightly higher.
Okay.
It still got like a great to excellent rating for me, like in the sevens. So it was very, very good. But the bourbon won over because I thought that it was a harder uh, needle to thread
Sure. Interesting.
in
But you
balancing the two.
appreciate that at the same time, and you can recognize that, right?
Exactly. And that goes to the intentionality. I'm like, if someone
Right.
is thinking about this, I'm going to judge them by how well they balance these
Sure.
influences.
Yep.
And I was like, the rye and the Calvados are balanced beautifully, but it's also you have a spicy element. If talking very very base terms, you have a spicy element and you have a sweet element.
Right. Right.
Those are easier to balance. Sweet and sweet without it being too sweet is harder. So there's a little more. There's like a couple of tenths of a point that go up because I know it's harder, and it took more intention to get that balance right.
And that kind of speaks to the company on the whole, where if I were to sum up our aims for sourcing whiskey in a simple sort of one sentence, I would say we're looking for things that are unique, but the way you understand that would be different than what we mean. Because unique to us could be as simple as it's 99% corn. We get samples and expecting exactly what you might expect without the Armagnac finish. And we're blown away by the fact that it's not only far away from our expectation, but a beautiful spirit, a bourbon that defies expectations given the fact that it is not a sweet bomb in your face. I don't know about you, but I see a high corn mash bill and my brain instantly goes to mellow corn and tries to kind of, live in that space. So when I taste something that could not be further away from that with a very similar mash bill, done in a
Mhm.
very, in a strictly speaking, similar production method, that's something interesting and unique to me in a huge way. And granted, that's the lower end of interesting and unique. There are some things that we find and we say, we need that. I don't even care what it tastes like. Granted, I always care what it tastes like. But we're in this interesting world where there's so many different products out there. There's a lot of companies that are selling off stocks for various reasons. And it's unprecedented in the sense that we are able to acquire things that are interesting, that are unique, and make them even more interesting and unique, but not at all for the sake of. We're not just saying, oh, let's get a 500 ppm.
Hope you muted yourself.
Sorry about that. We're not just saying let's get a 500 ppm Scotch whiskey out there just because we want to be on that cutting edge, pushing the envelope. No knock against that by any means. There are a lot of challenges involved in that production, but
Like
we
you're
are
not going to out
more.
Octomore in that sense.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Maybe I'm not a fan. No knock against the product. I don't knock
No, of
any
course.
product, but it is not for me. It is. I
And that's
believe
fair.
I've used the word or the phrase "affront to God" before, but again, that's my own personal flavor palette preferences. Most other people in the room were blown away with the magnificence of it. And I can appreciate it as well. I mean, a good allegory for that is mezcal in general. I love mezcal as a spirit, appreciate the hell of it. If I went into an intensely smoked mezcal, or better yet, Sotol distillery, I would probably throw up and pass out just with the intensity of the aromas and these smells that I am not particularly a fan of. Does
Sure.
not mean it's bad by any means. In fact, might speak to the unprecedented nature of what this place is doing. But yeah, so when it comes to interesting and unique for us, that also means something like our 1990 rum. That was actually, through our understanding, was a 1985 rum. We learned through some due diligence that it had been blended with a rather small percentage of 1990 rum, but that just made the flavor profile that much more unique. When I taste 1990 rum, when people, more accurately, when people blind taste me on it, I will get it wrong every single time. I will think it's a whiskey or it's anything but what it actually is, to the point where if anybody blind tastes me on anything, I'll say it's the 1990 rum, just to be safe. You never know. But yeah, interesting and unique. It's a simple mission that is not quite as simple to actually achieve, but we have a lot of the right tools to get us there. We have a lot of great connections. We know a lot of great distilleries, producers, brokers, etc. I'd probably have a chat every other week with various brokers, with various distilleries saying, hey, this parcel just came up. I think it's perfect for you. It's very important for us to have a good relationship, and me in particular, to have a good relationship with somebody who may be supplying me with anything. They need to understand, okay, here's where we're coming from. Here's what we're looking to achieve. This is what you should see and instantly think of, basically. If I put me on the top of your list for, oh, that's interesting and weird and different, and Pete Lynch probably wants it, And
Sure.
yeah, I mean, again, not for just the sake of, but sometimes for just the sake of, I will say, experimentation is what gets us where we are, right? It's how we come up with some weird products like 1928 or some other stuff that's coming out. Is somebody did something for some crazy reason, and guess what? It worked out.
Absolutely. And it's a great segue to the 1928. But before I forget, I do want to ask you, because I'm not sure I know the story. So obviously you worked with Raj for a time while you were at Whistlepig. But you stayed at Whistlepig for several years after Raj's departure. I'm curious to know how you either reconnected or how you moved over to the Bhakta Spirits team.
Sure. It's not a very interesting story, but it's, I'll tell it.
It's a story that hasn't been told, though, so that's why.
Right, exactly. So I left Whistlepig at the end of 2020. So I was there for about 5.5 years or so. I was doing some consulting for quite a while. That was basically what I aimed to do. And to be perfectly candid with you, I kind of told myself, all right, I can consult with various brands, get to know them somewhat, expand my own boundaries. I have a lot of experience, but up until then, it was in one distillery and doing everything one way, if you will. And maybe I might find the next place, to settle down, if you will. So I did actually end up finding the next place, which was a very small startup called Piermont Brands, which is a buddy of mine from the Whistlepig days and a buddy of his as well. Our focus was super premium tequila. And we had a great plan in place. They're still kicking it. Unfortunately, we were undergoing a capital raise. This was at the end of 2022. The market was not great. Everything kind of went to shit, as it is wont to do. And we had to let me go. It's still a funny thing to say because, my hiring was dependent upon that. So I'm back in the weeds, seeing what's out there, taking a look. I stumble upon Taylor Hanson, who was a good industry friend of mine from back in the Whistlepig days and just in general. Just an absolute legend in this industry, I would say, from Chicago, or has made quite an imprint in the Chicago market for the most part. But I saw him at Barkov in Brooklyn. And he basically, I saw him and he was wearing a Bhakta hang tag. I was like, what are you doing at Bhakta? I had no idea. And he was running hospitality. He's like, come on up. We got a college campus. I was like, what the fuck? College campus? And he's like, bring Savannah, my girlfriend, who he also knows. And we said, sure, we'll be up there, in 2 weeks. Went up here, was blown away, honestly had no idea about Bhakta at all. I had been following the messaging and keeping in touch to some degree, but I had no idea that it was a legit college campus that, Raj had purchased and had begun to refurbish and was running the operation out of. I really didn't know anything. once I came up here and I said, this is pretty freaking cool. This is very reminiscent of early days of Whistlepig. And it's a college campus, don't hate that. And by the way, I probably would get to taste some pretty cool, unique, exclusive spirits that I would never, ever get to even dream of tasting. Then I said, all right, I want to work here. So then I started to bug the hell out of Raj. And it was pretty funny, actually. Originally, he called me and said, I want you to come up and hop on and this and that. I was like, great, let's set up a call for next week. A little bit of silence for a little while. So, you got to keep on pushing the buttons, if you will. I had my goal in sight. I was going to achieve it. And about a month later, I ended up joining the team full time. This was back in October of this past year, 2023. And funny enough, actually, when I say join the team full time, that was not the original plan. I was originally going to join for a 6-month period for both of us to see if there was a right fit there. Kind of touching on my notion of consulting earlier. And when I sat down to sign this consulting agreement, instead I was presented with a full employment agreement, and the works. And I said, what? After about an hour and a half, I had signed it though. So, I was very lucky to know Taylor, first of all, because he's one of the few people I consider a mentor, to be frank, on the sales side, that is. He saw me, a young 20-something-year-old kid, never been out in the field. And he said, okay, you walk into a bar. This is what the bartender sees. This is what he thinks. This is how you set up an appointment. I'm not a sales guy, but I'm still very grateful to learn this stuff. This is how you make a sale realistically. And just taught me how to be a guy in this industry, simply put, how to walk into a bar and not look like an asshole or act like one, which I very much appreciate. So he gets 2 big wins now. Good for him. But yeah, that's the simple, not that exciting, but hopefully continuing to increase in excitement with every day I work here. Story of how I joined.
Absolutely. So with that, jumping over to this 1928 blending experience that we did. So I've described on the other 2 episodes, but it was very enlightening for me, and I'll repeat why. It's because we were dealing with only 10% of the spirit that we could really play with, 7 vintages that we could play with, and they had to be, I think, we could use no more than 4. I want to say, I think they had to be like,
yes,
yeah, no more than 4.
Yep, and all equal percentages, yeah,
right. So 2.5% of the total,
right,
of the total. So it was, and we had 20 or 22 people in the room, and we all came up with different blends.
Right.
They all tasted differently. And we're dealing with these very small percentages in the overall scheme of things in the bottle. And I was really impressed by that experience. And I highlighted that a lot in feedback. It was just like, this was great. This was an experiment where we could, as consumers, as media people, if you will, as just people, see how minute differences in using 73 versus the 88 or even the 93 could make a tremendous difference in the final palette that you get. So was that an experience that you created?
So no, it was not an experience I created at all, actually. I will very pridefully say that, this was all Giles Garnham, who was our operations manager, Raj, and everybody else. They created this process throughout the creation of 1928 itself. And if I were to extrapolate on that, I would probably say it's for the exact reason you're mentioning. Quick little story is, when I first joined, I was looking for an office space. I'm in a library now, which I love, but I found this one room that I opened up, and I was immediately hit with the smell of cloves, because there were several bowls of just cloves in there. But more interesting, there were about 150 bottles of you name it in there as well. And I very quickly sussed out that this was the room they did R&D for 1928 in. And when I say 150 bottles, I mean it. And every bottle was different vintages, rye with different finishes, you name it. You better believe that throughout that process, there was an understanding gained that, wow, we can change something as small as 2.5% of an Armagnac input, and it will completely change the flavor profile. And I think it's worth mentioning too, that during your press visit here, it was a competition. The winner and the loser, first and fourth place, were basically the same blend. They had one different input. That was it. Or perhaps two different inputs, 5% total of the overall blend. That was the only difference. And the blends could not have been more different. They could not have drank more different, could not have been geared towards more different audiences. And how would you ever get to know this if you weren't able to go through the process itself? Because I can't help but put myself in every blender's shoes when they're doing this blending experience. And I'm saying, okay, the base of the blend is 60% rye. That's our standard 1928 input. It's actually, just for your knowledge, it's a blend of finished and unfinished rye. It's a 60% pure rye, 40%, about 3 to 4 month finish in one of those 400-liter new toasted medium. Actually, it's a medium to medium long for these Armagnac casks. So that's the bulk of our blend. And you're already probably kicking yourself saying, what am I doing here? 60%, I cannot even choose. The next piece is 30% Calvados. You do have some choice there. You get to pick between one of 3 finishes, being a bourbon, an Islay, and a French oak finish. But even that, you might think, oh, okay, it's going to impact the blend quite a bit, but where does my agency come in? Then you start to taste the different Armagnacs, because the way I like to start these things off is say, before you do anything, you need to taste everything. The number one most important thing, I think, to being a blender or to creating product, period, is understanding your inventory. Understand the flavor profile, understand how they mesh together, understand even things like volume if we want to get more esoteric. But taste through these, try to mentally put them together, like I was mentioning earlier, and think, maybe the stewed fruits would work pretty well with this front aromatic, lacking a mid to back palate, younger input. But it isn't until you start to put those blends together that you truly understand, oh, wow, this has a major impact. And I think it's when you start to finally talk to the people in your group who are making their own blends, and you start to taste between them, and you see what they put in, and you find out the guy across from you did one different vintage input, and his is 10 times better than yours, and you're kicking yourself saying, what the heck? How is this possible? And maybe you start to mess around a bit more and put in some 83 instead of the 92, and you say, damn, okay, that is even more different. Maybe not better, but it's one of those things where, to quote probably the Three Stooges, you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. And blending is very much one of those things where 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. It might equal 5, it might equal -1, might equal 0. You really have to try it out and start to build up your knowledge and see how one input at a small percentage can impact things. And I will use the anecdote of something like a blended Canadian whiskey. I've actually done various blends for world whiskeys that are going to be similar to a blended Canadian whiskey. But blended Canadian whiskey is oftentimes, 95% what we might call barrel-aged vodka. It's very clean, light, flavorless spirit distilled to a high proof, put into a barrel that is used until it holds liquid no more, effectively. Like I would joke, because I've seen this quite literally, they will only call a barrel done if it doesn't lose all of its whiskey before the barrel before, or the barrel after rather, is filled. But it's 95% of this stuff, which really doesn't have much flavor, and maybe 5, maybe 3% of Whistlepig 10-year, these flavoring stocks. And while the flavor of that actual flavoring input may not come through and it's got a bold sort of spicy backbone, it does add a shocking amount of actual flavor to the profile. And when we take that sort of lower brow mentality and apply it to the higher brow, we see it in something like the 1928 blending program. I obviously have been blending for a while and doing experiences like this, like with farm stock, as I mentioned earlier. But I think that our blending program is kind of the most eye-opening. It's one of those things where, yeah, okay, it's really easy to make a different product if I give you 3 different input, or if I give you 9 inputs and you can pick 3 of them. Chances are everyone in that room is going to have a wildly different blend. But if you have a blend that tastes nothing like the guy next to you, you both use bourbon finished Calvados, you obviously both had 60% rye in there, you happen to have 2 of the same vintages, but one vintage makes all the difference. It speaks to the importance of blending, but it also speaks to, I think, personalization. I've had some great conversations with people who have done this program that are perhaps looking to purchase a bonbon. That's what we call these private barrels, if you will. They are bonbons. And the reason for that is a bonbon is another name for a demijohn, or a glass container, where we will oftentimes in Armagnac production place spirit when we have decided it is done aging. We want to put it in an inert vessel that will not impact the flavor, so we put it in these bonbons. We happen to find out bonbon makes 12 cases, volume wise. That's a pretty nice number right there. But what's really interesting is I have some deep conversations with people depending off if they're on premise, off premise. Okay, this is a great blend. This is my favorite at the table, but I don't think it's the right one for you because you guys are on premise. What are you looking to do with this? Cocktail program, featured cocktail. Oh, we're looking to do a Manhattan with it. And I say, let's make up a blend. Let's go make some Manhattans with it. I think that we need to focus on something that's a bit more flavor forward, a bit less sort of easy drinking. Where on the flip side of that, if I have an account that is maybe a less whiskey focused account, maybe a more sort of catch-all liquor store, you might want to make something that's going to be more of a crowd pleaser. It might not be a pinky up, sit there for an hour and a half, nose it. It could very much satisfy that, but they're looking for that. I'm going to buy this bottle. I'm going to be happy with it no matter what level of drinker I am. And it's really interesting to work at that level too, because that's how deep this spirit creation process can get on that, minutia of a 12 case deal where we're talking about just how significant these impacts and blends are, and then trickling that down to the actual consumer and saying, what do they deserve? What do they want? What do they expect? Most importantly, when they come into your store, your bar, your restaurant, whatever it might be, and how do we tick that box the best? So I didn't make this program, but I'm definitely going to steal its modeling and try to model various things based off of it going forward. And I think it's a great educational tool. I mean, I think it's important for just the whiskey industry, the spirits industry on the whole, to drive education. Why do you like whiskey? Because you understand it and seek to understand more every day. The first time I really had my aha moment with a glass of whiskey, well, I'll back up a little bit because this is a bit more of a story, but my ex-girlfriend, her dad was in town when I was in college. He bought a bottle of Lagavulin 16, Four Roses small batch, and Knob Creek maple. And then he left 2 days later. Didn't have the time to crush 3 bottles, shockingly. So I ended up inheriting 3 bottles of whiskey. Those were my first 3 bottles of whiskey. And I remember, opening the cork of a Lagavulin. It's like, what the fuck is this? Like, what? Like, this is Sharpie, basically. And Four Roses is the same, where, I would put a fat cube in a Glencairn, which is hilarious in hindsight, and just kind of sit with it. And then just eventually started noticing, oh, wow, that does smell like vanilla. Oh, wow, that does have okay, yeah, that does smell like permanent marker, but it's kind of nice, maybe. And, the more you sip, the more you taste, the more you think about it, the more you understand it, the more you enjoy it. And that's even scientific. We, at a base level, we must understand the reward of alcohol to be able to enjoy it at all. Your first natural ice or Busch Light probably didn't taste that good. Your 15th didn't taste that much better, but it went down a lot easier, I'm sure, and granted, we're dealing with things where we appreciate the flavor, but that's because we're able to get past, and our noses are evolved enough, and we've had enough time to build our palates and say, all right, I can recognize this 60% alcohol, but even more so, I can recognize the intensity of flavor, get past that, and not be off-put by it, and appreciate the flavor therein. So that's a bit of a longer answer than you might have been looking for, but I am chock full of those sorts of things.
No, it all makes sense. And I think for me, the most important point to kind of the most important takeaway, I guess, is what you were saying about when you are picking a bonbon or a single barrel or picking this blend, like it's the flip side of intentionality,
right?
Of what are you using it for? And I agree. It's not about choosing the quote unquote best, like what you like the best. It's what is it for? Because yeah, you can have a great sipper that's not going to make a great Manhattan, or it's going to overpower it. Or so I think that experience on campus rather, and I think that and being in the library were my
nice.
2 favorite experiences, because they're to the core of what you guys are doing.
Nice. That is a nail on the head right there. Do you mind actually, because I've become disillusioned, this is now where I work, and I'm just like, this is normal to have a bunch of barrels in a library. Do you mind educating, if you haven't already, our listeners as to what our library actually is?
Sure. So, and obviously correct me if I misstate anything. So the library, the Griswold Library, is your bonded warehouse.
It is one of our bonded warehouses, indeed.
It's one of your bonded warehouses.
Also still a library at the same time.
It is. yes, there are still many, the shelves and the aisles are still full of many of the periodicals and books that were there the day the college closed. And it's, and then there's, you go up the flight of stairs on the second floor, you have a wide aisle between the stacks. And in that aisle are two by two, side by side barrels of Armagnac.
That might
And
be from the 1970s and 80s.
exactly. I think those are from the 70s and 80s. The one on the first floor was more from the 90s, I remember, because that was where my birth year was.
Ah, there you go.
And
Yeah, that's my corner as well, right there.
yeah.
What's
And
your birth year, real quick?
92.
Ah, yes, Team
Yes.
92. I knew we
Yeah,
had
you too.
something.
Yeah.
Yep, 92.
Yeah. And I said to someone else, I think it was JP, that it was funny in a way, but you guys have so many different vintages that you didn't have my friend's vintage, because that particular year in the 70s, early 70s, was a drought year, and so there
There
just
you go.
wasn't any product.
Yep.
But other than that, I mean, you have so many that it's hard not to find either a birth or a grad year or a marriage year, if you wanted to get a particular vintage.
Right.
So yeah, we I had a great time in there. You walk in, you get to see the barrels clustered in their particular age ranges. There were a couple of other surprises that I'll leave off for now, because I don't want to upset marketing. But a few other things that we saw that we really got to taste and see. Ooh, this could be something really even cooler in the future, or just as cool. And you also walk through, and there's a room or two that you walk through where you see, and actually I think the one you're in might have been one of them or adjacent to it, where you see, oh, they've got, like you've got all the equipment in here. Like, this used to be just a library, and now it's a library and a laboratory.
Now it's a multi-purpose library.
Right, a multi-purpose library. Because obviously, being a bonded site, it's much easier to have the lab in the building or connected to it than it would be outside, which makes a ton of sense. And yeah, just being able to the reason I think I enjoyed that so much was because it was also, I don't think you were with us the second night. I wasn't able to make it in the first night. I was just dead tired. I just passed out.
I'm a lame boy. I need my sleep. So I was shocked that I was even there the first night. So
yeah, fair enough. So but that was where I ended up talking to JP for a while. Obviously, talking to just to Morgan, to a bunch of different people, even in our group, that I hadn't really talked to quite yet.
Yeah.
And sipping these new things, these vintages that were maybe you had a barrel or two of, as opposed to ones that you had a lot of stock of, relatively speaking. And the I'm trying to figure out the best way to phrase this. I guess it would simply be that the way that part of the visit was structured is such that, perhaps even more so than the 1928 experience, was that you got to really get a sense of what it would be like to work for Bhakta Spirits and be in the lab and be like, as you as you were saying earlier, like, the 85 might work great here. Maybe it's the 96. Let me go to the barrel, see how it's doing.
Right.
And like, because maybe I tasted a month ago, and a month in Armagnac terms shouldn't be a ton of difference, but maybe there is for some reason or another. And like, maybe the 96 from a month ago isn't the same as the 96 today. And I want to make sure that it still matches up, and maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
Now you're thinking like a blender. And by the way, I need to taste all the barrels in that batch to make sure that there is consistency. Maybe make up a blend that's volumetrically based to make sure that once I dump them, they'll blend consistently. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was my experience, and I loved it. I wish I had been there for both nights.
Yeah, I'm bummed I missed you, seriously, because I don't remember seeing you there, which means that we didn't cross over. Yeah. But I think that the library also helps just touch on the mission of Bhakta overall, and almost more importantly, dive into like the historical aspect of it, where Raj is a massive history buff, military history as well. I consider myself, a peon in that game, but I am quite interested. And it's fascinating to think, okay, what the hell was going on in 1963 in France? We think of these producers, and we got to think of them like Bordeaux producers who have
Sure.
no idea they are celebrities the world around and don't care. They're local, it's very much like here, local Vermont guys, doing their thing. This is what they've known. They probably grew up in a family, like maybe their dad did it as well. Who knows? And more interestingly, go back to areas of time like World War II. Like
Mhm.
goddamn, this is an amazing vintage. And by the way, they were under Nazi occupation, probably bombed out as hell. Like, how did this guy get up, go run the still, and make this delicious product during wartime when all these sanctions are in place? With just really
Yeah.
taking that bite of history and drawing yourself back. And even, I mean, you jokingly mentioned the 1868 earlier, but goddamn, like what a different time period in so many ways. Like, good luck having anything as simple as electricity, especially in a place like, Condom, where Armagnac is made in the Normandy area.
Mm.
Not exactly industrialized in a lot of ways, but
Sure.
yet they are making spirit that I cannot mimic myself, that I would have trouble
Mhm.
approximating, appropriating, and they're probably doing it all by hand. And I mean that, like they're mixing up the actual mash of grape, the mosto, by hand with a giant wooden spoon. This is George Washington Mount Vernon Distillery as they reenact it, but
Mhm.
legitimate production practices. Like that fascinates me
Yeah.
to no end. And it also makes me laugh a little bit to think, in 3000 or in 2100, if the world still exists, what will they think of, a bottle of 2013 rye that somebody popped up and happened to find? What will they think of our times? And, oh, did he have any idea that the greatest of all wars was on the horizon? Like, well, he was, who knows? But that
Right.
historical aspect is, while romantic, legitimate and real. And I think you do get a true sort of notion of the spirit of time when you are drinking Bhakta, not just vintages, but even, our 2014 bourbon, finished in 1976 Armagnac casks, with a deep Rancio character, while the world was getting out of its hippie phase and moving on to, maybe perhaps more economical pursuits, Armagnac was still the same. And it was the same as it was for 100 years at that point, 1868 being our oldest vintage that we have on
Mhm.
hand. The historical aspect is encapsulated in the library because we also have the library set up with all the books it had, Dewey Decimal, by year, etc. And we have each vintage, as close as it can be, perhaps in a bonbon, if not in a barrel, living in that area. So while you sip on some 1976, you can read books from the same era and kind of really get that feel. It's just fascinating.
Yeah.
Just fascinating.
Absolutely. And the historical aspect is you see obviously Raj's historical interests all over. The car collection is,
Oh my god,
you
yeah.
know,
Right.
I'm not even a car guy. I
Me neither.
generally
I am
could
not.
not give a
I'm a
shit.
reverse car guy. But
Yeah.
that
But
Roosevelt vehicle that he drove to the
yes,
inauguration, I'm like, damn, I'm sitting in the front seat. Nice.
that yes, that was impressive. That's still my favorite of the car
Me
series.
too.
So um and of course there are other parts of it too, but that yeah, I mean, you think of two, just to continue on that for a second. um in You have two world wars, the phylloxera
Right. Yeah.
plague.
Phylloxera cannot be overstated
um
either. That
right,
directly impacts all of Armagnac production.
right. So you've got stuff that's pre-phylloxera, and somehow through that, um through any number of wars, including the two world wars that had so much fighting in France and on
Yes.
French soil, and especially in
Devastation of infrastructure,
devastation.
of natural
Yeah,
environments, you name it. Yeah.
right. And especially you think of, like, we're recording a couple of days after the anniversary of D-Day. Like, you
Exactly.
have
I
the
can't help
Allies
but think of
coming
that.
through, coming through from the northwest onto Normandy and through, really through the Armagnac region,
Quite
and yet,
literally through the Armagnac region. Yes.
right, and yet these casks survived from before that time. The somehow, nobody inadvertently took out or bombed the itinerant still, the guy
Even
just
something
pulling the
as simple
still in the
as the
back.
water source, didn't turn
Right,
into a miles long trench system. Or even if it did, it was recovered in some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
right. So all these things survived, and it almost requires a bit of, it requires you to honor what you're
Exactly.
blending, what you're tasting, whether it's a single vintage or a blend or a seasoning, if you will, in
Right.
something where you're just using a few drops. That, yeah, pay homage to the fact that this survived to be something that you experience and you get to taste today. which is incredible. And you think of it when you come across dusty whiskeys from pre-prohibition, it's the same idea
Right,
of,
exactly. Yeah, it's inspiring in a lot of ways, and it's almost like we have the responsibility to steward these stocks and to almost protect them in a sense of, they've survived this long through all these horrible things in the face of adversity. And by the way, they didn't just survive. They've actually
right.
become some of the greatest spirits in the world, some of the most well-aged spirits in the world. I mean, I think this is a total tangent, very quick one, but the fact that Armagnac producers are able to achieve such ridiculous levels of age with not just a drinkable product, but drinkable is the complete wrong way to put it, a beautiful product.
Sure.
It just is worth tipping one's cap to in a lot of ways. Like I said, I would have to study for quite a long time and change a lot of things I know to even be able to somewhat replicate that. Just massively, massively impressive there. But yeah, this notion of, we need to protect the past, we need to preserve the integrity, but also, we are experimental, we are innovative, so we're not going to get held up on tradition for the sake of it. We're going to understand this, we're going to build upon it, we're going to shepherd and steward it. Most importantly, we're going to bring it to the world, if you will. I liken the story of Bhakta to the story of Whistlepig, and not for the obvious reasons. I liken it in the sense that a spirit was saved. I mentioned earlier that Whistlepig tenure was the flavoring stock for something like Canadian Club. Not Canadian Club, Mist, whatever. It was a flavoring stock. We saved that whiskey at Whistlepig, didn't we? We allowed the world, and this is pretty pat myself in the back, but Whistlepig made a spirit that never would have been accessible and should have been made accessible to those that enjoy whiskey, because what a spirit, changed the game in a sense. It said, we need to put this out this way. Your business model, Canada, of saying it's more cost effective and productive to age whiskey for 10 years and then, water it down basically, is not right. And we're going to prove it to you. The same exact thing is happening with this Armagnac, where it's a less grievous tale. It's not as if, somebody in Armagnac is blending this into Hennessy, but we are giving this Armagnac a platform that it probably never would have had. I mean, Armagnac sales are not massive worldwide and have never been. And it's not for lack of quality. It's probably for lack of other things like marketing, money in the industry, the Armagnac industry specifically. Whiskey has had a massive resurgence, but it's very much brought to you in part by the money that a lot of brands have, a lot of larger companies have to push things like education, push things like messaging. Armagnac doesn't have that and hasn't had any sort of line for that. So for me, I can't help but admire the kind of mission of Bhakta to say, we're going to buy up these spirits, we're going to preserve them, we're going to offer you the ability to taste something that goes all the way back to 1868. But more simply put, we're going to have this ability exist, period. You could not have purchased a birth year bottle of Armagnac. You probably never would have known of Rancia or something like that if you'd not been able to get into this world. And we hope that it spurs some sort of a similar revival that it did in rye. But really, most importantly, is that we're able to bring the spirit to the world. And whether that's in its own vintage form, whether that's in something like this 2012, that cask finish I'm tasting, which will be in a larger, interesting blend down the road, or it's a cask finish on a bourbon, Armagnac forward. These are all different ways to give light to this spirit that was very much shuttered and in the dark and probably didn't have an avenue until somebody wild and nuts like Raj came through with a dream, with the ability to take a chance and say, all right, this is a stupid idea if you're a business manager, but if you're an inventive guy with a bit of gusto, willingness to take a risk, the know-how, the willpower, most importantly, almost to push through it, then maybe, and not just maybe, there's really the possibility for something there. As a spirits nerd in a very different way, as I mentioned, it's very academic for me at this point, which just makes me even worse than every other whiskey nerd out there. But that's wild to me. That's huge. That's admirable. That's worth a pat on the back. And that's the only way that somebody like you or I are going to get to taste any of this stuff, isn't it?
Absolutely. And one last thing on the wood front as well, which I know you will appreciate as a wood nerd, is that you're, even with the quote unquote newer, so let's say the 73 vintage Armagnac, all the way back to the 1868, you're dealing with oak that got to age very differently, longer, different grain structures, tighter grain structures,
100%.
perhaps,
Yeah,
that you, we know you can't replicate today. We know that oak chemically is different today, even if it looks the same.
exactly.
And
And not to mention, too, the production practices involved, the lack of things
right.
like electricity. People
Mhm.
making barrels in 1868 had a hell of a worse time than we do now. Their
Right.
efficiency was less, but maybe their sort of focus was higher because they're that much closer to the barrel. They're the ones who are stoking the fire for the toast rather than watch. Not no knock against modern. In fact, I'm a huge progressive when it comes to technology, but ISC has one of the more sophisticated toasting programs in the world. They have an infrared scanner, which is telling you to the exact decimal, what is your temperature? Oh, it went down by this. You need to add this much pitch into it. Back then, they're just kind of, all right, looks good in there. It's been this long sort of deal, building out these barrels. They're seasoning in very different ways. They're coopering in non-standard ways, period, let alone speaking to the variability. And, it might be the actual guys who are making the Armagnac that are coopering back then. Every single step along the way to producing these products was wildly different back then. And I can't even fathom how. And honestly, I can't fathom how they did it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever tried to move 50 gallons of liquid, but it's not light. And that's only 50 gallons of liquid,
No,
right?
there's a reason that the there's a reason the barrel came to be. It's like the wheel of storage.
Right. Exactly.
Otherwise, you couldn't do it.
We are very lucky
Um,
the barrel came to
yeah,
be too in the way it did, because it was pretty much accidental in a lot of ways,
yeah.
that we realized charred barrels are the move.
Mhm.
Jim Bob down the road had some fish in his barrel. Now he's got to hold some whiskey because he can't drink it all in one sitting. Doesn't want it to taste like fish. So he's going to light it on fire.
Yeah,
Best way to get rid of it, burn it down. Just so happens that, Tim Bob, his cousin, said, damn, Jim, that's some fine, good whiskey right there. Eventually, somebody realized, oh, it's because we're burning it. It's not just because we're getting rid of the stuff before, but, Subob put it into uncharred new wood, and it doesn't taste as good. It starts that simply, realistically. And a
yeah.
lot of interesting innovations start that simply and build and build and build, and then we get to the point where we are, where we have these intensely calibrated flamethrowers that blast and char a barrel for the exact right amount of time, and then put it out. And they can roll through all these in an insane amount of time. And yeah, what a world we live in.
We do. And with that, I know we're at time, but I one more question for you, if you're all right.
Sure, I could talk all day with you, man. Come on, David.
So we started off this interview saying that you were known as a protege of Dave Pickerel, and it's funny, as you were just telling that story about the Tim Bob, the Jim Bob, and Mary. A part of him kind of came out in my mind with that, because I could see him saying that. Even though in full transparency, I never met him in person. I've just heard a lot of interviews, read a lot of stuff. So, having been at Whistlepig, and now you're at Bhakta, and I assume without spilling your cards, you'll be there for a good while.
One would hope, right?
One would hope. I guess my question is two-part. It's, do you intend to take on something like a protege or proteges in the future? And the second part being, what do you want your legacy to be from your time there?
I mean, yes is the answer to the first question, because how does something like this continue on? How can I start to do things like travel and run seminars and whatnot if I don't have full faith that everything can run the way I want it to? I mean, this is speaking to my ego, sure, but any spirits company needs that sort of consistency and that training up. And it doesn't even have to be for a protege. It could be for somebody who is adjacent or under you or whatever it might be. They're running their job. We're looking to improve efficiency. We're looking to improve quality, whatever it might be. We're at the point too where this craft spirits world has people who have worked at various places, people with experience, if you will, that can say, we did it like this at this place. And I'll say, okay, we did it like this here. What do we think makes the most sense out of those? What pieces can we pull from these to apply to this business and make it even better than either of those two things? So protege specifically, yeah, sure. It's not a focus in a sense, but you identify talent. Okay, this person has a great palate. This person understands chemistry in this sense. this person is going to be on my tasting panel for whatever reason. But yeah, I mean, longevity is the name of the game in my job, period. Consulting was a blast, but also painful because I honestly, until 2 months ago, I didn't feel comfortable designing anything here because I didn't fully understand the inventory. I hadn't spent enough time jotting everything down in spreadsheets, which you briefly touched on, but I will point out how lame I am, which is I do love working on spreadsheets. I think it's one of the most important parts of being a blender who's in charge of something like inventory. And, it's probably 25% of my job any given week, depending. But yeah, it makes me quite happy. But regardless, there needs to be consistency, sure, but it's not like it's not like training somebody under you is this is how you do it, copy and paste me. In fact, I would hope that they can innovate on these things and have the sort of same brain I might have at certain times to say, maybe we shouldn't do it like that, and here's why, and have those discussions and whatnot. Is there somebody like that here now? I don't know. Maybe they'll show themselves soon enough, But overarching, that's just an incredibly important sort of mentality period is, not just one individual, but everybody, share the knowledge, share the information, train as much as we can. I don't really care if you're not a sales guy, if you're never going to be public facing in your mind. I would like for you to know our brand story. I'm guilty of this. I need to train myself a bit more and get a better grasp for exactly what the Bhakta story is, despite what it may seem. Maybe it's just the high bar I set, but they're only gonna be better, and maybe they won't enjoy sitting there for an hour and talking, and it feels like class. But after the fact, they'll see over the weeks, over the months, like, oh, I understand what I'm doing better, and it's interesting, it's fascinating, in fact. And I never would have seen myself as what I do at all now, to be honest. I mean, in college, I was the opposite of what I am. I was not as analytical. I was very much not as scientifically focused. I went to college and I studied English. Go figure. Certainly not geared towards this world I've now joined into, but I think I'm just anecdotal evidence that you can take a lot of different people, and if they have the gusto, they don't need the know-how, they need the passion, and they need, a bit of a brain, sure, but it's that desire, it's that burning desire, it's that will and that need in a lot of ways. And if you can direct that, then you can create a gem out of not even a piece of coal per se, but you can shine that gem even further, I might say, and people can surprise themselves. And I think I'm, again, living proof of that, where, I used to joke when I was at Whistlepig in 2017, I'd say 5 years ago, if you told me I'd be where I am now, I'd slap you in the face and laugh and walk away, is how ridiculous it sounds, but it just goes to show. I think one last anecdote of how I even joined Whistlepig might be juicy for you is, so I was supposed to graduate in 2014 at UVM up in Vermont. Ended up graduating in 2015 because I had a bit of a tougher time at school than most, but I also had to wait for a summer astronomy lab, go figure. So ended up graduating summer 2015. And, okay, time for Pete to join the workforce, find a job, looking around and God knows what, like life insurance and stuff like that. And I go on Craigslist and I see an ad and it has the word Whistlepig in it. But that's the only clear thing. It's a like 2-sentence run-on paragraph type deal, no specific job role described, whatever. I'm already hugely into whiskey at this point, ready to go, jump right on it. I had been homebrewing for quite a while, might have done a little home distilling, maybe, maybe, but that's neither here nor there, we won't say. So, I had some experience, but funny enough, I was very much benefited by the fact that Vermont is the second least populous state in the union, because it turned out I was the most qualified person in the state for this role. And during the interview, like towards the end, we were wrapping up, and I felt so awkward because I was like, I gotta ask, what is this job? You guys have not said what the job is. Like, and they said it's for a distiller role. And I was like, God, okay, sign me up for sure. Like that sounds amazing. Granted, it was no walk in the park, especially the early days, but you could say I almost stumbled into this with a job posting on Craigslist of all places, for what was going to become the world's most recognized rye whiskey company. So I definitely had a stroke of luck there for sure. I'm glad now that I was worse at college than most and took a little bit longer. because I never would have ended up where I was. So fun little piece to chew on for you there, David.
So I think big believer in we all end up where we're supposed to be eventually.
Happy accidents, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I agree with you. I could keep on talking. I'm sure we'll have you again in the future. We see what happens with that pour in your glass.
Hey, there you go. Actually, I forgot
And
all about it. Barely taking a sip.
yeah. And yeah, I'm just really excited to see what you come up with now that you've got your feet under you and you can kind of take your own path there. And I really look forward to seeing how your legacy builds out while you're there. So
Great.
with that, I'll close out. Hang on with me for just a sec after
Oh, of
recording.
course. And I look
So
forward to seeing you back on campus, my friend, now that we've had a bit more time to get to know each other. And I'm sure it'll be more memorable than last time when we did not cross paths in the library, at least, and didn't get to share those experiences.
I'm going to say it would be very tough to beat that first experience. The, two ships in the night aside in the library. It was a really wonderful experience. I'll keep telling people that, and people in the industry who are eligible and who can go should go. It's worth it.
Okay, so
But
one up David's last experience. Heard.
yeah,
Gotcha. Can
done.
do.
I'll be there. All right. So
Excellent. And
Pete,
by the
thank you.
way, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention I am in New
Sure.
York pretty often. That is your neck of the woods, isn't it?
I am in Queens and I can jump into Manhattan anytime.
There
So
you go. Yep. I'm Upper West Side is where my lady lives, and I'm probably down there at least once a month. So I expect we may cross paths sooner than we might have feared.
I certainly hope so. Certainly hope
Awesome.
so. So Pete, thank you again for coming on, for talking, for being my third interview of the day. And I think it came out great. We made it through solid energy all the way through, which is important for me. And yeah, so hang on for a sec.
Sure.
This has
Excellent.
been
Thanks so much, man.
absolutely. This has been another episode of the Whiskering Podcast, the third of our Bhakta series, the Bhakta Sessions. I really hope you all enjoyed this. If you want to hear more like it in the future, let me know. I've got these guys to talk to. I've got more brands, and I would love to bring you in-depth, extra in-depth, let's say, interviews like these on the regular. So with that, cheers, and I will see you all next week.
Cheers.